following podcast is for informational purposes only. The contents of this podcast do not constitute tax, legal, or investment advice. Take responsibility for your own decisions, consult with the proper professionals, and do your own research.
And so I think for me, having meaning in life has always been a driving factor. And if I can bring value to what I'm doing, then I feel so great about that. And I really do feel like I'm bringing value to the Web3 space. And I am so certain that this is where I'm meant to be, and that the work that we're doing now is really going to lay this incredible foundation for a brighter future.
GRTiQ podcast.
We're like astronauts floating in the space of time. Just between the past and the future.
That is the sound of inevitability.
Welcome to the GRTiQ podcast. Today I'm speaking with Noelle Becker Moreno, marketing lead at Edge and Node, one of the core dev teams at The Graph, and as you probably know, Edge and Node was formed by several members of the original team behind The Graph. Similar to the stories of a few prior guests, Noelle is another example of how someone with a non-technical background moved into Web3 and began making an impact. As you're about to hear, Noelle's story is inspiring. She's a proud mother and has demonstrated incredible courage many times throughout her life. During this interview, Noelle talks about her career, which includes impressive chapters in entrepreneurship, as well as working at Airbnb, her path into Web3 and what compelled her to make the move, and how she and the marketing team at Edge and Node helped contribute to the Graph protocol. As always, we started the conversation by talking about Noelle's educational background.
So I went to college to be a broadcaster. I went to LaSalle University, which is like the Big Five in Philadelphia. I grew up on the Jersey Shore. They had just received like a huge endowment for their communications department. So they had the latest and greatest technology for broadcasting. So I was a reporter there for a paper, had my own radio show, and ended up getting my degree in mass communications with a minor in English and philosophy.
What can you share with listeners about what you were doing before you joined Web3?
Yeah, I was thinking about this in my professional journey. What I realized is that my pivotal personal experience changed my professional trajectory. So I moved to Boston. I did marketing for Marriott's Custom House there, which is their timeshare, and then became the marketing manager. Everyone would always say, you need to be in sales, because I just love talking with people. So I jumped into corporate sales for FedEx for a while, and I was really passionate about volunteering for the Horizon Homeless Initiative there. And then I got married and had a baby, all really quite fast, within a few months. So it was a beautiful surprise, all of it. And until that point, I hadn't really seen myself as a mom, but I was suddenly obsessed with this little human. And every little minute I was away from him, my heart just cracked. So I was the president of this newcomers and natives organization on the North Shore of Boston, got close with a mom there, Heather, through that organization. She was a RISD grad, super creative. And one night we were talking about how awful plastic baby toys were, how ugly maternity clothes were and baby clothes were. We're going back 17 years ago. So, picture was just only Babies R Us. And so with a click of a wine glass, we decided to open up a store called Chula Mama. It was a high-end maternity and baby store on the North Shore of Boston and Salem, Massachusetts. Put in our savings and we dove into the retail world. So you'll see the pattern here for me. I just dive in and figure it out. It's kind of learn by doing mentality. We designed a store ourselves. And at the time, it was super edgy and unique. I feel like everybody's doing it now, but we made everything ourselves. The tables were outdoors and that type of thing. And we found and sourced unique baby toys, books, and clothes that were 99% of the stores in the US weren't carrying. So we were supporting private label lines. We were the first to import some of these very well-known toys like Sophie the Giraffe, which I think is the most popular baby toy now on the market. And we came out of the gates really strong. So the right people came into the store. We got Best of Boston within the first few months. We learned really quickly about vendor management, importing, sales, managing employees, and of course, marketing. We were super, super careful with our marketing dollars. We learned really fast that they kind of went really fast. And so we started thinking of ways to grassroots market everything. And so we launched our own line of graphic tees for moms and kids. And I would say nowadays, you would say like 3 of our designs went viral. So we had a maternity tank with a Joan of Arc quote that said, "I'm not afraid, I was born to do this," before you're having a baby, which I still love to this day. A boys tee that said, "Lock up your daughters." So a lot of the Red Sox players, you'd see their little babies in the stands wearing that. And a girls tee that said, "President, not princess." And it just so happened Hillary Clinton held up a baby wearing that back in the early 2000s. So kind of went a little bit viral. So within 9 months, we were in the black and opened a second store on the North Shore. And we tried to be really cheeky with some of our ads so they would stand out. So I remember we did "knocked up, be a knocked out." And all these moms were calling us, grandmoms rather, and saying "I'll never come into your store. That's so offensive." But we had all these really cool, edgy moms and they were just our client. So Heather was really brilliant too. And she would design our ads. So they would look like unpaid ads. So you see a lot of that now, but at the time you didn't. That was really new. So I learned a lot about marketing and how to be scrappy and effective. And then Amazon reached out to us and asked us to be part of their small business pilot, where we would be the first to have private labels on Amazon. So it opened up this whole new revenue stream for us. We, had our online store, our brick and mortars, and then this third revenue stream from Amazon, which was a game changer. And then after 5 years, my husband at the time got a job at Stanford that we couldn't pass up. My brother was living in SF. So we decided to move to SF. I thought I would just expand Chula Mama, but it was leaving Heather with a lot back in Boston. And so we decided to close Chula Mama. And then within weeks, I was remodeling and designing our new home here in San Francisco. And a local mom blogger came by and asked to write about it. And then I started doing interior design full time. And that was over 10 years ago. That led for me to refine this whole new business model that no other designer was doing at the time, which I would do these really quick redesigns in under 30 days and remodels in under 90, and everything was off shelf. So no design center. It was really meant for the middle class and to do these really quick flips. So I started my own studio and I leaned into Instagram at the time. Like I said, this is over 10 years ago. That was kind of the big social media that you wanted to be on. And I kind of would write these rambles, post like I talk. And it really seemed to resonate with people. And then I started having vendors like House and Dyson and Ria Tile send me stuff to photograph and style. So it was just really like a dream, for me in the design world. And then someone told me that Airbnb was looking for a way to scale this new Plus platform, and they thought I would be perfect. But I loved my design business, but I had been an early adopter of Airbnb. We had a small unit on our first floor, and I was one of the first to use their platform. So I was this huge fan. So I did go in and meet with them, and we kind of went through my business model and how, maybe help them scale this new project called Plus. And we talked about different options, like maybe utilizing my business or helping work as an advisor. And then we we had that meeting and I didn't really think about it after that. And then unexpectedly, I became the sole parent and I was all of a sudden responsible for these 2 boys and I needed all these practical things like insurance and 401ks. And so I reached back out to them and I'm like, "Hey, if you're interested, I'm ready. And, I can come full time." And so it was perfect timing. They wanted to launch this pilot program for Airbnb Plus, where we would invite superhosts to this new Plus program. So pretty much if you were a marketplace host, we would invite you if you were a superhost. And if you agreed to do design changes and kind of abide by this 100-point checklist, you were, part of this program. And so, to be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. I had been an entrepreneur for years. My dad is, my grandfather is, and I really feared I would be this cog in a wheel. But it was the complete opposite. There was this entire new world where at my disposal were these amazing group of engineers and writers and photographers and product teams and marketers. And it was, an entrepreneur's paradise. And I was sold. We used to call it Leading Roush at Airbnb because Roush Street is where Airbnb started. And for sure, I was bleeding Roush.
So as you mentioned there, you moved into entrepreneurship, which is super interesting because you didn't have a ton of experience in it at that point in your life. And sounds like you just rolled up your sleeves and got into it. And what's surprising is you had a ton of success, right? I mean, 9 months into this thing, you were making money, you were getting news and really building a brand. I'd love to know what that experience was like for you and what you learned about entrepreneurship during that time.
Yeah, I really learned that it's all what you put into it, right? So my business partner, Heather, and I, we worked our asses off, but we also really wanted to be present for our kids. And at the time, we each had 2 kids. So we would do a swap, right? Where I would be in the store really doing stuff. And she would take all 4 kids and watch them do design stuff on her computer. And then we would switch. Every day we switched. So one person had 4 kids and one person didn't. So I always tell everybody, I think it's really hard. And I really admire people that are entrepreneurs all on their own and have no support system. Because when you have somebody like I had Heather as this incredible business partner, my husband was incredibly supportive. And I think when you have that, it allows you to really make good decisions, not based on fear. So I talk to designers a lot and I say, I think why I was successful, even in my design career, is I always interviewed the client first. And if we weren't a match, if I was like, this is going to be hell working with you, I said no. I didn't care if it was $1 million job or what have you, and it was because, of course, I was lucky enough I had support of my husband. But I think that it allows you when, if you're spending most of your life working, which a lot of us are, and passionate about something, which I wasn't, like everything I did, I think having the ability and the support and finding that network of support, whether it's through friends, family, just to even tell you, good job, I have your back, or there's a bed you can crash on if you lose your place, like whatever it is, that you can make the decision that's right for the company, that's right for your business, and not just chasing the dollar. You're always going to end up better.
Noelle, you also mentioned there that becoming a mother was one of these life events that changed your perspective on career and the things that you were focusing on. What was it about that experience, or what is it about being a mother that had that impact for you?
Yeah, I have never experienced anything like it. So I think I mentioned it earlier, but I just was not one of those women that dreamed of being a mom one day or even thought I was. It happened like really fast. And as soon as I saw it in his beautiful blueberry eyes, I just felt this love for this human like I've never felt before. And both of my kids have just really changed how I interact with humans, how I make my choices for the day. If you are going to spend a big chunk of your day working on anything and it's taking yourself away from these beautiful humans that you love so much, it better be worth it. It better have meaning. And so I think they've just really helped me prioritize and make really great decisions. So having kids was kind of just this incredible awakening of making sure that everything I do in my day is intentional and every decision I make has meaning.
What I also think is remarkable about this is you leave the retail business and then you jump into interior design. Again, something that you probably had some natural ability for, but not a ton of background based on what you've shared so far. And that's a huge success as well. Where did you get your design aesthetic and what informed that as your product, I guess, to clients?
You know how so many people do these books and they figure out, what am I meant to do in life? And I look back and I'm like, oh, it was design. So my dad's the smartest man I've ever known. He was a college graduate, but he kind of had the golden handcuffs and had this blue collar business, like a painting and wallpapering business. So he would come home with rolls of really expensive wallpaper or paint or scraps of wood or desk, and I had this box of a room. I mean, it was so small, probably 10 by 10. And he would, since I was little, 5, we would sketch out the room. So one time I would want all mirrors on the right side and this new wallpaper on the left side or a desk that would fold down and clip up. And we changed my room all the time. And he always let me do it. We always sketched it out. I always was the one designing people's homes and friends' homes and helping them out. I did it for free forever. And even when we opened the spaces, we always got kudos for the design, right? We did hand murals, we spray painted lights. And like I said, all this stuff is done now, but at the time it was really, really unique. And it's funny because my brother is the same way. He's in design, and UX UI, but he lived here in San Francisco and he did those really cool Adirondack chairs that he would find scraps of wood from San Francisco, but he made them ergonomic and he would paint them and have cool designs. So we both have this we kind of see things before they're hot. Now you see them everywhere, but he literally was doing them 10 years ago. So yeah, it's just innate in us, this creative piece.
Well, I love it. And the other part of your story that really resonates is the fact that you start this interior design hustle. You're a single mom now, so I'm sure you're burning both ends of the candle. And you now reach out to Airbnb and basically say, hey, I'm available, and pursue that. What gave you the courage, given everything you were probably dealing with at the time, to pick up the phone and make that pitch?
Yeah, it's so funny. I think about this now because friends ask me too. And it was I was a user of Airbnb for, over 10 years. I remember people didn't even know what it was when I was Airbnb-ing our place downstairs. And I remember when things were like, oh, it's the only place I think I would want to work for. And so I knew that what I had created with Noelle Becker Studio was huge. People would be like, I can't believe you're doing this, because the way design works usually is you go to the design center, they give designers 50% off. And then they will tell their client, oh, here, I'm going to give you 20% off. And then they kind of take that 30%. And then you're waiting for this piece to be made that's sometimes taking like 20 weeks. After COVID, it's even longer. And so for someone to say, hey, I don't even care about those margins that much. I'm just going to go to West Elm or Crate and Barrel because I think they have awesome shit, right? And I'm just going to get this stuff. And I know I want to work with the clients that can afford this, So it was, you just do that. And so I knew Airbnb needed that. And I knew I was going to bring value. And I think that's it. I think it's that I knew they needed me and that I would really bring value to them. And at the end of the day, we all just really want to matter and bring value, right? So I think I had that confidence.
Airbnb is at one stage very entrepreneurial, but by the time you arrive, I'm sure it's established and it's doing business. I'd be curious what you learned during your time at Airbnb on a rocket ride, I have to imagine.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because I use that example all the time of flying the plane as we build it. Yeah, I think if you talk to anyone who worked there, they would all say it's like finding a unicorn. They have this intense hiring process. It's like 17 interviews on average that you go through. It's literally said statistically, it's harder to get a job there than to Stanford. What I think is unique about Airbnb is within their interview process, because I've thought about this a lot, you have 5 cultural interviews, 5. Just on if you're a good fit for the culture of Airbnb. And they're weighted as evenly as, what you do there. And so if you're going to work there, if you're, you have to be passionate about their mission, which is to create a world where anyone can belong anywhere. And you have to align with their 4 core values, which is champion the mission, be a host, embrace the adventure, be a serial entrepreneur. And so before you get hired, you kind of have to say, what have you done in your life prior to coming to Airbnb where you have showed an example of this? So everybody you come in contact with are like these good humans, they're mission driven. They're really trying to lead with values that align with what you have. And so it's really like an incredible place to work. And a couple of my best friends, shout out to Melissa and Clarice, they came from there. And it's just an incredible place.
That hiring practice is super intimidating for anybody outside looking in and probably feels like a huge insurmountable barrier for anybody that wants to even try to work at such a great company as Airbnb. Do you think it's the right approach? I mean, you went through it, you ended up working there. Do you like the approach they take?
Yeah, I really did. Of course, when you're going through it, you're like, oh my gosh, this is so intense. But like I said, every single person that I worked with, I came in contact with, we all have different personalities. We all come from different walks of life. This is a worldwide organization. I worked with people that are literally living in China, but everyone I worked with was a good human at the end of the day. And I think that came from their focus on being mission driven and making sure that you align with their mission. And also, if you have to jump through that many hoops to get a job, you're dedicated, right? You want in. You're like, this is it. I mean, there are times where I was like, I have a successful business over here. Do I want to do all this? But once you're like, yeah, I'm in. And then you're with all these other people that were like, yeah, I was in too. And you're all aligning around the same mission, which is really a beautiful mission, right? To belong anywhere. We all just want to belong and matter. So I think that it actually is really great.
The GRTiQ podcast is made possible by a generous grant from the GRAF Foundation. The GRAF Grants program provides support for protocol infrastructure, tooling, dApps, subgrafts, and community building efforts. Learn more at thegraph.foundation. That's thegraph.foundation.
Hi, this is GRTiQ. As we near the end of 2022, a roller coaster of a year in so many different ways, the GRTiQ podcast is already booking incredible guests for 2023. The success of this podcast is the result of you, our listeners, who tune in each week to meet a new member of the Graph or Web3 ecosystem. Many listeners have taken a moment to leave a 5-star rating or a review wherever they download and listen to the GRTiQ podcast, and you can make a huge contribution in supporting this work by doing the same. This generous act, which only takes a few minutes of your time, has a huge impact on our efforts and the ways in which people can find and benefit from this podcast. I'm grateful for listeners who take the time to leave a rating and a review. Thank you. Thank you for your support. So you're living in San Francisco, you're working Airbnb, and at some point you must become aware of crypto because we're talking today. You've obviously moved into Web3 and the crypto space. Take us back in time to when you first became aware of crypto and what your original impressions might have been.
So I first heard about crypto from none other than Tegan Klein. She's the co-founder of Edge and Node. So probably like 4 years ago, she was actually part of the pilot program at Airbnb. So, part of what I did in my company and then what we also did at Plus is we tried to really get to know the host and incorporate their passions within the design of their space. So it allows the space to kind of not only like be unique, but also be representative of who they are. So when I met Tegan, she was part of the pilot program. I was a part of her up level and I'm like, okay, how do you want this space to feel? She's like, I want it to be a manifestation and blockchain space. And I was like, okay, cool. I have the manifestation thing down, but what the fuck is blockchain? I have no clue what this is. Literally, I had never heard the word. 10 years of design, never had that request. So I'm like looking it up. I'm trying to find prints, wallpaper. What can I find on blockchain? And I find like a print on Etsy of the Bitcoin raccoon. And I'm just like, okay, so we do it. We have the manifestation neon sign and we have a Bitcoin raccoon poster. I'm trying my best to make this her space. And, I really clicked with Tegan. She is one of a kind. So I invited her to Airbnb HQ to have some wine. And she was adamant. She's like, this is the future. But I knew no one in the space. And Tegan was like the only one. And so I started poking around. I tried to like Google it. I actually saw a documentary on Bitcoin. All of it actually painted at that time like a pretty glum picture. And I knew no one that was supporting it. So I did not go down the rabbit hole. I was like not sold. I love Tegan, but I do not know what this is. I am kind of fine over here.
So the follow-up question must be, what changed? When did you fall down the rabbit hole and what ended up pushing you down?
So I stayed friends with Tegan and, we were friends over the years. And the January before I joined Edge and Node, Tegan and I were having dinner and drinks and, kind of talking about the New Year's resolutions. And I have all the typical stuff. I'm like, oh, I want to get in shape and I want to find gratitude more and tell friends how much I care. And I forget exactly what Tegan said, but she said something like, I want even distribution of wealth across the world. And I was just like, okay, yeah, like, sure. And this is in the midst of COVID. Things just felt so bleak and things that used to have meaning or like importance seemed not to. And here was this human being telling me like solving problems that started to feel really like insolvable. And I think that's when I was like, okay, I want to learn more. And then at the same time, my VP and director from Airbnb went over to Coinbase. And then all these other people from Airbnb started going over to Coinbase, joining other Web3 companies. And then I thought, oh, damn, I started having like a little bit of FOMO. And if you know Tegan, I literally say in her past life, she was a historian. She has lists for everything. So all I had to say is, hey, I'd love to learn a little bit more about this. And then she just sent me this ginormous list of videos, books, podcasts, like everything. And I just started going down the rabbit hole. And then the more I dove down, the more use cases I saw until it just seemed like everything we were doing currently within Web2 could be done astronomically better within this technology. And then everything I was doing just daily in my life, I was thinking like, God, this is archaic. I remember I refinanced my home and they came over and I had 50 papers that I was notarizing on my car hood. And I was like, this could be done on the blockchain. And then I had this permit that I was trying to get through the city. And it was like taking 3 years, or I thought of like my dad, who was the smartest man I know and had all these really cool ideas to expand his business, just didn't know the right people or had the right means. And I thought, God, like in this community, his merit would be the reason for supporting him, not who he knew or what bloodline he came from. And then I just love the gig economy so much. So I was thinking, gosh, like what could be done on the blockchain with the gig economy? So everything started to be like, oh gosh, we need Web3.
So you had this epiphany around use cases. You mentioned meritocracy, which is obviously a huge part of the Web3 ethos. Eventually, you make the decision and make the full plunge into crypto and Web3. When was that, and what was it exactly that you did?
Well, I told Tegan, hey, I'm going to talk to my old director who I really respected about going to Coinbase. Here I love design. I always thought this is all I was meant to do was design and like own my own business. I love mentoring people. I loved running organization. I thought this is it. But then I just had this pull toward Web3. I couldn't unsee it. And so I told her, I was like, hey, I think I'm going to talk to my old director about Coinbase. And that's when she kind of sat me down. We talked about like centralized and decentralized platform, the graph and Edge and Node, because we had really never dove really hard into the graph or Edge and Node prior to that. And then she set me up with a meeting with Yaniv at a coffee shop. And so we just talked about all these use cases, and really how this tech would even the playing field globally, where you would have merit-based opportunities. And no longer would it be like who you know or what bloodline you came from. And right away, I said, there's a huge gap in educating the masses, right? People like me on this technology in this future, it's like super intimidating. I want to help educate people. I want to tell my dad about this. I want to tell everybody about this, I want events all around the world. We meet and we connect. And I was really more interested in these, Web3 curious people. Like I really wanted to educate them and tell them like, hey, there's this different way. And Yaniv was already thinking about this. He's like late years ahead. And so it began. And so essentially Tegan's the one that got me into it and introduced me to change the world, to help the world. But I always say Yaniv had me at hello. So I say, Tegan introduced me to Web3 and that this technology was going to save the world. And we had to stay true to the mission.
I want to go back a little bit to this meeting with Yaniv. And for listeners that don't know, the Graph was founded by 3 primary founders that formed the protocol. And they spun out into a core dev role. And there's currently a handful of core devs working on the Graph. And the core dev group that they formed to support the Graph is Edge and Node. And a lot of the interviews with people within the Graph ecosystem have a common thread of either reading or meeting with Yaniv and it being a light bulb moment for them. You mentioned it a little bit there, but if we could go back, what was that coffee meeting like? And at the end of that, did you have the conviction to say, yeah, this is where I belong?
Oh, yeah. I was all in. I'll never look back again. And it was from that meeting with Yaniv for sure. He's so passionate and such a visionary for what this is going to do. And so determined that it's, decentralized and we do it the right way. So he would rather go slow than go fast and not do it right. He's mission driven. I've never met anyone like him that isn't chasing the dollars. He really wants to impact the world and he believes the community and this technology is going to do it. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear I was drinking the Kool-Aid, but I felt like I was. You just hear him talk and he's so intelligent. He has so much experience and he's so passionate. And not only that, but what I really, really admire so much about him is that he's bringing everybody along with him. I knew nothing about Web3, crypto, anything like that. And I remember trying to get my ENS name and not knowing how to do it. And Yaniv sending me ETH and being I'm going to stay on this call till you do it. And I was embarrassed. I was no, I'll do it later tonight. Thank you so much. I'll figure it out because I was just so clunky. And he was nope, I'm staying on the call. You're doing it. And I got it. And I think I talked about that for a month. Everywhere I went, I was you need an ENS name. It's really easy. Get a repo wallet. I was just telling everybody how they had to have this. This was the future. And I think it's really important to have people like Tegan and Yaniv and Eva Balin's the same way that really take the time for people like me that were total newbies and they're so far ahead and they literally take the time and explain everything and want to take you on the journey. And I think that is really the difference between this community and any other community.
Well, I have to ask, here you are going down the rabbit hole of Web3 and crypto, but you're employed at Airbnb, which I got to imagine friends and family are a little bit envious and respect the fact that you're working for a trailblazer in its own right. And yet you're pursuing a different track. What do you tell them at this time?
Yeah. They were definitely like, what are you talking about? I feel like every time I tell anybody, hey, I'm working in Web3, 80% of the people are like, what's Web3? And then like the second question is always, oh, do you mean Bitcoin? So I really love the analogy of the graph being the Google of blockchain. So I'll say that a lot. But I also always like to say, like, one day Google is going to be like the graph of Web2. But I still feel like, because it's funny, I feel, when you're friends and you get to know like Tegan and even everybody that's at the Graph and Edge Node, I feel like this newbie and I'm constantly like, oh my gosh, I'm so late to the game. But I realize that 80% of the world still isn't in the game, right? They still don't even know what it is. That's why I'm like so passionate about educating everybody so that they can really understand what Web3 is and why it's so meaningful for the future.
Web3 is obviously disruptive to Web2 in so many ways. Blockchain is disruptive to so much of our everyday living from a technology perspective. But Airbnb was super disruptive to a well-established industry, the hotel industry. Do you find yourself on occasion having similar experiences or feelings as you're working in an environment that promises to disrupt so much of other things, and you did it at Airbnb?
Yeah, for sure. We used to say that Airbnb Plus was like a startup within a startup. And I think that's true. I think that what's really cool about Web3 especially is there's a lot of the gig economy that's out there right now, right? You have, Uber, Lyft, and Airbnbs and Sonder and all of those. But with Web3, it really feels like this revolution of sorts. And I feel like revolution can have a negative connotation. So sometimes I don't like to use it. But I really feel like it's a movement. And I don't know if you've ever thought back in the days of women being able to vote or Black people being able to use the same bathroom as everyone else or not having to sit on the back of the bus, like all of these things. And you think to yourself, like, gosh, I hope I was going to be on the right side of history at that time. I really hope that I would have been strong enough to stick up and say like, hey, this is what's right. And really look fear in the face and just continue to do it. And I almost feel like all of us that are working in Web3, this is our opportunity. And I think it's kind of once in a lifetime where we can be a part of something that's going to make this huge change that some people are literally saying, this doesn't matter. What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? I hear that way more often than I hear that this is the future. And so I think it's so incredible to be able to be a part of something that's really going to change the world.
I've asked this question before, but I really want to ask it to you, which is this. What does it say about the Web3 space that the door is wide open for someone like yourself who has such a diverse background, wasn't really on a path into technology, wasn't on a path to Web3, but yet found themselves right at the cusp of it and got a job working at Edge Node, a real trailblazer in the Web3 space? What does it say about the industry?
Well, I think it's incredible. And I talk to a lot of people about this. I'm always trying to get people to come over and, work in Web3. And I think mostly everybody just is like, oh, it's just engineers or developers wearing their sweatshirts. And like, I'm just not going to fit in there, especially for creatives who I'm friends with. But I kind of gently remind people that within any organization, protocol, DAO, right? There's roles to be played, and they're not just engineer or developer roles. So, taking my background and everything that I've done, I've literally used every one of my skills, right? Like down to designing the House of Web3 space, all of these things. And I think what's really, really cool about Web3 in the community is they are so, so welcoming. Everybody that I meet, I remember like really early on having wine with Martine from the Graph Foundation and just being like, I don't understand this. When him explaining wallets to me, Rodrigo, the chief of staff at Edge Node, literally helped me set up my wallet, right? And my ledger. I just don't know any other space where people are taking time out of everybody's busy as hell and taking time out of their lives to be like, hey, we so much believe in this and we so much want others to understand the importance of this that we're going to take our time to show you how and to explain to you why it's important and to help you be a part of this. It's so, so welcoming, unlike anything I've ever felt.
So Noelle, let's turn our attention then to Edge Node. What can you share about what you're doing with the team at Edge Node?
So I lead marketing events in the newly launched House of Web3. And I definitely feel like this is an honor. Whenever I'm hiring for the role for the marketing team, I always share that we have this incredible responsibility to essentially communicate all the hard work that's being done behind the scenes at the Graph. So all the core dev teams, what everyone is working on and the way in which it's communicated. So I always think this is going to go down in the history books on the Web3 revolution. So just totally humbled to be a part of the Graph and Edge and Node.
And you brought up the House of Web3. For listeners that don't know, this was an announcement made at Graph Day earlier in the year. What can you share with anybody that missed that announcement about what the House of Web3 is?
Yeah, so we just launched the House of Web3 in the Presidio in San Francisco. So it's close to 13,000 square foot space. It's an invitation only for people with merit within the Web3 space to come and co-create and collaborate, come and try to solve the world's greatest problems and really talk about what are the problems of society, what are the problems here in San Francisco, and how can Web3 and the technology and be a part of helping solve that. And then Edge and Node in itself, we're going to be sponsoring things. So we're going to hold workshops in this space, which will be great. We'll have speaking engagement, networking, all of that kind of stuff within the space. So it's going to just be this incredible place where people within Web3, we're talking innovators, founders, anybody that's in the space within merit can come and hear incredible speakers and be inspired, do workshops. People that aren't in the space or want to learn more about Web3, I hope that we have a lot of educational series and you can work and coordinate and like Tegan likes to say, maybe you're even find your soulmate at the House of Web3. So we're really excited.
That's incredible. So I want to encourage any listeners that live in the San Francisco space to check out the House of Web3. And it's a really cool initiative from the team at Edge and Node, trying to create an epicenter, if you will, in a really interesting part of the country that's known for tech and startups, for members of the Web3 community to get together and meet. When you explain the relationship between Edge and Node and the Graph, how do you do it?
I for sure say we are a core developer supporting the Graph, but even when I joined Edge and Node, at the time, we were the only core developer. So the founders of the Graph were also the founders of Edge and Node. And then in addition to that, there's Tegan Klein and Carl Hagerling. But initially, we were the core developer team supporting the Graph, and we also support the marketing and events for a bulk of the Graph. And then, of course, Edge and Node. And now it's really been incredible to see how the Graph community has just grown so much and is so plentiful, right? We have this great cast of characters. We have all these other core developer teams, and, we have the indexer curators and now even the advocates.
And this has come up on the podcast before as well, but it was really an epic moment in the history of the Graph protocol that these three founders that came up with a solution that they could have easily turned into a SaaS centralized company, decided to spin it into a protocol and move into a core dev role. And for listeners that don't know, each core dev team is awarded a grant. And in that grant, it kind of specifies what they are to do in their core dev role. And we've had all the core devs on this podcast before. And so specifically to Edge and Node, when it comes to marketing, how would you describe the work you're doing as a core dev as it relates to the marketing efforts?
Like I mentioned, being one of the first core devs of the Graph and the founders being on Edge and Node, it was really easy initially, right? When we were thinking about messaging to really spitball all of our socials and blogs, because essentially we were spitballing on the Edge and Node team when we're marketing with the team that started the Graph. And then as all the different core developers came and they each have this amazing, beautiful piece they're supporting within the Graph, it's just been so incredible to expand upon that and really trying to tell their story also. So it's been really unique in the fact that we are supporting a lot of the marketing for the Graph. And within that, we're supporting the marketing for all of these core developer teams because we are all essentially supporting the Graph and the Graph's mission. And so making sure that we are letting the community know about launches and updates and what all the other core developers are working on, the Advocate DAO is working on, and all of these cast of characters between developers, indexers, and curators are all working on is just really incredible. I think that it's really a group effort now with marketing. It's not just essentially just Edge and Node. I really do feel like it's our whole team, and we definitely meet and talk with the core developers, the foundation, and we really try to make sure that our messaging encompasses all that is this beautiful community within the graph.
What then can you share about some exciting things that the marketing team is working on?
Yeah, our main focus is the sunrise of decentralized data in 3 phases. So phase 1 of the sunrise, disabling the new hosted service subgraph creation for blockchain. Phase 2, the sunbeam, disabling hosted service subgraph upgrades. And then phase 3, the sunrise, disabling query of hosted service subgraphs. And then we also want to focus more on the community and highlight the amazing things grantees, indexers, curators, advocates are working on. And then personally, I'm really excited also to dive into like snackable educational content to get more non-crypto folks over to the community.
Hi, this is Noelle Moreno with Edge and Node. If my conversation with the GRTiQ podcast has been helpful to you, then please consider supporting future episodes by becoming a subscriber. Visit grtiq.com/podcast for more information. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
GRTiQ
Podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Roger that.
Cool. So a lot of important things there. And as you mentioned there, the sunrise of decentralized data was another announcement that came out of Graph Day. And a lot of people in the community are interested in watching more subgraphs move from the hosted service to the decentralized service. And the marketing team, in my opinion, is doing an excellent job focusing that message and empowering people to make that migration. Of all the things you listed there, is there something that you've been working on that, you know, excites you or engages you more than some of the other things, something that you're really excited about?
Oh, that's such a hard one because I feel like we've done such really cool stuff. Like when we launched the Graph Explorer and Subgraph Studio, at first I was like, oh, this is the best because we did this really great video. And I felt like we really explained all the hard work that had been done with the team. And then, you know, Graph Day was so amazing too. But I think right now I would say it's probably we have the migration that we're so excited about, like everything that you mentioned. And I'm just really stoked about the House of Web3. I really feel like this physical presence of a space and a building and to have all of these players within Web3 that are really contributing to the community and the society in the future and working toward a brighter future for all, like to have them all in the space is just going to be like such a game changer. So I think marketing the House of Web3 is going to be a feat all of its own because we're going to have tons of speakers and workshops and all of that. So I'm really excited to see how this unfolds and how the community interacts with the House of Web3.
So as you look back at your marketing career and the things that you've done at Airbnb and now at Edge and Node, helping support the graph, how is that experience different? Are they two opposite things or are there a lot of similarities there as you think about it?
I do feel like they're kind of opposite. I think about it as the analogy of trading stocks. Like the graph is like being on the trading floor at the New York Stock Exchange, and like Airbnb would be like the Charles Schwab office in Boston. Both are doing really great things, but in the Web3 space, information is coming at you at lightning speed and work is being done like even faster than that. And things are changing faster than that. So it really makes it hard to plan out like a marketing campaign that would launch like over 6 months or like a year's time, which often is done at a place like Airbnb. But if we try to plan something 6 months from now at the Graph or Edge and Node, it might not even be relevant, right? You could create a video for Airbnb for something like Plus. You know, you'd have time to write a script, scout location, film, edit, and distribute for 6 months later. But that would be really hard to do in the Web3 space unless we focused on like evergreen material.
So Noelle, what would be your advice to listeners who are hearing your life story? They're hearing about your career track, moving into Web3, doing all this great work at Edge and Node. What would you say to those that say, boy, I'm non-technical. This story really resonates with me, but I don't know if I could do it. I don't know the path into Web3. Do you have advice for them?
Yeah. First, I would explain that just like in any current company or workspace, all jobs are needed for the future and even the Web3 future. So when I was at Airbnb, I didn't need to know how like the platform was created or what exactly was going on like under the hood, but I had the experience, the strategy and like skills to get people to the platform. So take a look at those tools you have in your tool belt, right? The experiences that you have had and look at how that could be utilized in a fast-paced protocol or company. for me, I not only had like marketing, but vendor management, operations, video production, design, sales, strategy. And I've ended up using almost every single one of them since I've been here the last year and a half, which wasn't necessarily in the job description. So like bring your toolbox, work hard, leave your ego at the door, and really lean into like what matters and resonates with you within the Web3 space, the DAOs, the protocols, and like focus on that. So for me, I wanted to be a part of like a mission-based company that was going to have an impact on the world and leave the place better than we found it. And I wholeheartedly believe that the Graph and Edge and Node are doing that. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Are there any big milestones or anything that you're looking forward to as you look at the road ahead on the marketing efforts or maybe just the protocol itself?
I think I'm just really excited for where we're going to go. I think that especially with the Graph, the community just keeps growing, right? There keeps continuing to be more players. You have the core developer teams, like we talked about. We have now like the advocates and the advocate DAO. We have all of the roles within the ecosystem, the indexers and delegators. And I just feel like this is going to continue to grow as people realize how important the Graph is and data is within Web3. So I'm really excited to see the people that are going to come and influence Web3 and especially the Graph and Edge and Node and what we're going to do to help change the trajectory of the future.
So Noelle, as you probably know, I've had the opportunity to ask people that were involved early on in the Graph some fun questions because it kind of goes to the source of the well. So in the case of Carl Hagerling, for example, who was an early designer on the Graph and came up with some of the brand and the colors, had the opportunity to explain what his original thinking was on that. And it's super interesting for listeners to know what went into those decisions in the early days. In your case, you've been helping support marketing of the Graph in your role at Edge and Node for a long time now. And I would love to kind of just hear you share the value of what the Graph is, as I think it would be very interesting for listeners to hear it from somebody that's been involved in doing it for so long.
At its foundational level, the Graph enables people to use open APIs to build subgraphs for dApps and to query and index data. But putting on my design cap here, I like to think of the Graph as the Mario Kondo of Web3, right? There's all this data on the blockchain and you use the Graph and subgraphs to like beautifully organize the data so it can spark joy to the end user. So leaning into that comparison a bit, it helps me double click onto why like the Graph is so important for Web3. So like one of the fundamental principles of the KonMari method is having gratitude for all things and people, and often asking me how I can be so like passionate about data. But the truth is like we all should have this immense gratitude for data. As far as I'm concerned, it's like one of the basic human needs right now, right? You have food, air, water, and shelter, and we cannot live in today's society without data. And so I believe the Graph is where all the world's blockchain data will pass through and be organized.
If you could go back in time, let's say right after that meeting with Tegan and with Yaniv, before you ventured into Edge and Node, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and give yourself some advice, what would you say?
Be kinder to yourself. I think I definitely had imposter syndrome for a really long time. Everybody in the space, especially at Edge and Node in the Graph, I mean, literally the smartest people I've ever met in my life. And, I'm a sole parent and I'm busy, and so sometimes I just feel like, oh my gosh, like I can't keep up. I'm not enough. I'm not smart enough to be in this space. And I especially felt that in the beginning. I don't feel that way now. And that has a lot to do with the community and just how welcoming and encouraging everyone is. So I think I would just tell myself to be a little kinder and to realize we all belong to be a part of Web3 and we all need to be a part of Web3.
Noelle, one thing that really inspires me about your story is you're doing all of these things. And there was a point in your life, as you mentioned, that you became kind of a single mom. You were raising your children on your own, but you were also pursuing career. My question is about work-life balance. And I'm sure it's been a challenge, but I would love to know how you've approached that and maintained that balance.
Yeah, I mean, so I will say I am a sole parent and not a single parent. So it's super different. And to all the sole parents out there, let's unite together. I think when you are a sole parent where you literally have no one, I don't have anyone else, right? That's going to like take the kids for the weekend or the night or help me make decisions or help financially. So everything is going through the lens of what is best for them. And so I really try to make those decisions. I do know at the same time that I have to work. And even if I had all the money in the world, I would want to be working. I know that about myself. However, I think what it's told me to do is the time that I have with the kids is I want to be really present with the kids. So I really do try to like put down the phone. I remember one time watching a video and they were like, how do you feel watching this person? And it was like a son and a father talking, and the father just had the phone in his hand. He wasn't even looking at it. And how did the son feel? And it's like, oh, he's waiting to go on that phone, right? So there's times where I literally will like take my phone and put it in the other room. Or if my kids come in a room, I like shut the laptop, or I literally schedule date nights with my kids. And I have since they were little, like, hey, it's just our time and we're not going to have phones at the table. So when I'm with them, I try to be really present. And I literally think that they've helped me prioritize my life and make sure that like whatever I'm doing that's not with them, I make sure that it has meaning.
So Noelle, I only have 2 more questions for you, and then I'm going to ask you the GRTiQ 10. The first question is, are you optimistic about the future of Web3? You've mentioned a couple times, and it's pretty apparent for those that are in the space that we're early days here and there's still a lot of growth. Are you optimistic about the future?
I really am. We're truly like laying the foundation for the future now. I really do believe it's going to be better through decentralization. Like I talked about earlier, like buying a house without this archaic 5,000 signatures and, your titles and deeds that need to be notarized, or owning your own healthcare record to go to any doctor in the world and like have it at your fingertips. Gig economy, taking the middleman out of that. So those that are working and contributing to that are paid in accordance with the effort they put in. These are just like a few of those. And then, you just recently had Afropolitan on your podcast. And I was just like, holy shit. A nation was created on the blockchain. So yeah, I'm so optimistic. I think my only worry, I would say, is that these centralized monopolies, they're going to want to stay current and want a piece of the pie, so to speak. And I'm really, a little bit worried that they're going to be this wolves in sheep clothing, and people aren't going to know if they're not like educated properly, but the difference between like decentralized or centralized. And so they're going to package themselves as Web3, but really not be. And that's probably like my only worry, but, optimistic.
And the last question I want to ask you is more personal. It's about you and your motivation and what drives you. And I'm asking because if you look at your story and zoom way out, you're somebody that just jumps into things. And it's obvious you have the skill and the talent to do things, but a lot of people just don't have the courage to walk through the door and do it. And here you are, you went from entrepreneur and then you went into interior design, Airbnb, and now Edge and Node and Web3. What is it? What drives someone like you to keep walking through that door?
Oh man, that's such a great question. I think like we talked about earlier, and like I told you this, I just noticed even thinking about my experiences is that I've really allowed what's happening in my life to affect the decisions that I make. And so I think we all need to have like that gut check, right? And be like, what am I passionate about now? So there was a time where, designing spaces, I really felt like I was making a difference in people's lives. I would have notes from people that said, hey, I left like an abusive partner, or hey, I quit my job, or I've never felt this peaceful, just because of like the space that was created. And I was like, oh man, I'm making a difference. And then at Airbnb, we had people that, were literally supporting their families because they had an Airbnb or had proposed to somebody when they were traveling. And so you had these experiences where you're telling yourself like, hey, I'm making a difference in the world. And so I think for me, having meaning in life has always been a driving factor. And if I can bring value to what I'm doing, then I feel so great about that. And I really do feel like I'm bringing value to the Web3 space. And I am so certain that this is where I'm meant to be, and that the work that we're doing now is really going to lay this incredible foundation for a brighter future.
Well, Noelle, now we've reached a point in the podcast where I'm going to ask you the GRTiQ 10. These are 10 questions I ask each guest of the podcast every week to help listeners learn something new, try something different, or achieve more. So are you ready for the GRTiQ 10?
Oh, I'm so ready.
The GRTiQ 10. This is the way.
10 questions for astronauts floating in space.
This is the way.
Noelle, what book or article has had the most impact on your life?
You Are the Placebo by Joe Dispenza. And really like any of his books, Being Supernatural, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, literally just so eye-opening about what's possible with our mind and energy. And it really makes you feel like we have some power over how we feel and what happens to us.
Is there a movie or a TV show that you would recommend everybody should watch?
I would say Interstellar. It's definitely not my favorite movie of all time, but I do think everyone should watch it. It like really flings you into the future of what could become of our planet. And instead of it being like 1,000% bleak, there are a few people that recognize like advanced technology as the way to save us all. So I think we can take a lot of learnings from that. It's also a good reminder when you hear all the FUD about Web3 to remember that not like everyone can see the mission and what needs to be done, but we need to like brave it and continue on in spite of the naysayers.
If you could only listen to one music album for the rest of your life, which one would you choose?
Landslide by Fleetwood Mac, which is probably aging me. It reminds me of my parents, especially my dad. And I always danced with my boys when they were babies to it. And to this day, they know if it comes on, I'm like grabbing their hand or dancing with them in a room.
What's the best advice someone's ever given to you?
To go into every situation as the learner. That way you're listening more than you're talking. And you can also never be intimidated. If you're the learner, every conversation is just an opportunity to grow.
What's one thing you've learned in your life that you don't think most other people know yet or have learned for themselves?
I think that God or Mother Earth, the planet, like whatever you believe in, has a plan greater for you than you can ever imagine. And so sometimes when it seems like a hard blow or a huge setback is happening in your life, it may just be like a slight course correction that when looking back was the exact moment where your seed of greatness was planted.
What's the best life hack you've discovered for yourself?
Quiet time in the morning. I'm like a big believer in a lot of what's written in the 5 a.m. club. I still have a hard time with the 5 a.m. part, but I think, before you check Slack or emails, watch a TikTok, you should meditate, move your body, get some natural light and listen or read something that inspires you or educates you. And then and only then start your day. So most days I do this, and the days that I don't, I'm definitely off.
So Noelle, based on your own experiences and observations, what's the one habit or characteristic that you think best explains people finding success in life?
They never stop learning. They just continue to be sponges, like even in their golden years, reading, listening, continuing to be that learner. And also like fighting against solitude. I think we're better learning from each other. So stay curious and social, my friends.
And Noelle, the final 3 questions are complete the sentence type questions. The first one is, the thing that most excites me about Web3 is?
I think through decentralization, we are actually going to find our greatest connectedness together as a society because we are getting rid of the intermediaries. So this enables us to like interact with each other. So there's a lot about the Web3 movement that actually like brings us back to the basics and how it's been used. And so I'm really excited about that. The technology just opens up new ways for us to coordinate and work and interact together.
And complete this sentence. If you're on Twitter, then you should be following,
of course, the Graph, Edge and Node, and the House of Web3.
And the final question, complete the sentence. I'm happiest when?
I'm sharing a meal with family and friends and laughing a lot.
The GRTiQ 10.
I show you how deep the rabbit
Noelle Becker Moreno, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your story. It's incredible to hear all the things that you've done. And I really appreciate that you would take time today, not only to tell your personal story, but to share what you're working on at Edge and Node.
I just wanted to thank you so much for this time and tell you how honored I was to be on this podcast. It's absolutely one of the shows I always recommend to all my friends to listen to. And you have such an amazing gift to connect with everyone and to tell their stories. And to know you is to love you. I've been grateful enough to get to know you. So I'm just so grateful that you gave me this platform to share my story and hopefully inspire some folks in the world to come and find their place within the Web3 community.
Oh, well, it's an honor for me. And so I'm grateful to you. If listeners want to follow you and stay in touch with the things you're working on, what's the best way for them to stay in touch?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is first Noelle, and that's the letter 1, ST, no, and then the letter L. And my Telegram is the first Noelle, spelled the same way. And if you like design, I may start doing some side creations on Insta. So Noelle Becker Studio is still up on Instagram.
This has been a production of the GRTiQ podcast. For more information, including detailed show notes, visit grtiq.com. grtiq.com/podcast. That's grtiq.com/podcast.
Please consider contributing to this project and helping build the community by subscribing and leaving a review. GRTiQ Podcast. Roger that.